Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES horizon and watched the stars shift as his ship dropped out of hyperspace. The massive Council Station Omega hung before them like a crystal city in the void, its countless towers and docking bays glowing with the light of 1,000 different species. Jake had seen this sight dozens of times over the past 5 years, but it never failed to impress him. The station was home to nearly 900 different alien races, all working together under the banner of the Galactic Council of Unified Species. Captain, "We're receiving clearance to dock at Bay 7, said Lieutenant Amy Foster from her communications station. Her voice carried the same excitement it always did when they returned from a successful mission. Amy was young for a starship officer, barely 25, but she had a gift for languages that made her invaluable during first contact situations. "Thank you, Amy," Jake replied, settling back into his captain's chair. "Lisa, how are our new friends from Kepler 7 doing?" Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her science station with a smile that lit up her entire face. The chief science officer had spent the last 3 weeks working with the peaceful inhabitants of Kepler 7, a species of tall, graceful beings who communicated through patterns of colored light. "They're amazing, Jake. Their biotechnology is centuries ahead of anything we've seen. They've agreed to share their medical knowledge with the Council, and they're excited about joining the galactic community," Commander Ryan Webb, the ship's security chief, turned from his station near the weapons controls. Ryan was a big man with careful eyes who rarely smiled, but Jake could see he was pleased with how the mission had gone. "No complications, Captain. The Kepler 7 people are genuinely peaceful. They don't even have a concept of warfare in their language." Jake nodded with satisfaction. This was exactly the kind of mission he loved. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years, making them one of the newest members, but they had quickly become known for their skill at first contact situations. Other species found humans easy to trust, probably because humans seemed genuinely interested in making friends rather than conquering or exploiting new worlds. The docking procedure took 20 minutes, and soon the horizon was secured in one of the station's massive bays. Jake gathered his senior staff and prepared to make their mission report to the Council's First Contact Committee. It was standard procedure after every successful first contact mission, and Jake looked forward to sharing the good news about the Kepler 7 people. As they walked through the station's corridors toward the committee chambers, Jake noticed something odd. The usual bustle of activity seemed more intense than normal, and many of the alien beings they passed appeared to be having urgent conversations in hushed tones. Several times Jake caught groups of aliens staring at him and his crew before quickly looking away. "Is it just me, or does something feel off around here?" Lisa asked quietly as they entered a transport tube that would take them to the upper levels of the station. Ryan's hand moved unconsciously toward his sidearm. "I've been thinking the same thing. Too many worried faces, too many private conversations." They reached the First Contact Committee chambers, but instead of the usual warm welcome they received from Committee Chairman Velnara, they found the chambers empty except for a single maintenance worker who was cleaning the floors. "Excuse me," Amy said to the worker, using the common galactic trade language. "Where is Chairman Velnara? We have a mission report to file." The maintenance worker, a small furry creature from one of the Outer Rim worlds, looked around nervously before responding. "Committee is in emergency session. All humans told to wait in guest quarters." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. In 5 years of serving on the horizon, he had never been told to wait in guest quarters instead of filing his report immediately. "Emergency session about what?" The maintenance worker scurried away without answering, leaving the 4 humans standing alone in the empty chamber. They made their way to the guest quarters, which were comfortable but felt more like a prison as the hours passed. Jake tried to contact other human personnel on the station, but found that all communication channels were either busy or restricted. By the time evening came, Jake was seriously worried. Finally, near midnight station time, the door to their quarters opened, and Ambassador Carl Hayes walked in. Carl was humanity's senior representative to the Council, a skilled diplomat who had served in the position for over 10 years. But now his face was pale and his usually perfect appearance was disheveled. "Carl, thank God," Jake said, standing to greet his old friend. "What's going on? Why couldn't we file our mission report?" Carl sat down heavily in one of the chairs and looked at each of them in turn. "Jake, I need you and your crew to prepare for immediate departure. Don't ask questions, just get your ship ready to leave as soon as possible. Carl, you're scaring us, Lisa said. What happened? Carl was quiet for a long moment, then he looked up with anger burning in his eyes. The council voted today. 847 species voted in favor of something called the Human Containment Protocol. Only one species voted against it, containment protocol? Ryan stepped forward, his security training making him focus on the threat. What does that mean? It means, Carl said slowly, that as of today, humanity is restricted to the Sol system. All human colonies outside our home system are to be evacuated. All human ships are to return to Earth immediately, and an automated defense grid will be established around the edge of our solar system. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the station's life support systems. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. That's impossible. We've been model citizens. We've helped dozens of species, prevented wars, shared our technology freely. I know, Carl said. I've been trying to get answers for the past 18 hours. The official reason is that human expansion is too rapid, and our diplomatic methods are too aggressive. They claim we're a threat to galactic stability. Amy's voice was barely a whisper. But we've never attacked anyone. We've never even threatened anyone. The real reason is different, Carl continued. I finally got one of my contacts in the Xanthari delegation to tell me the truth. The major council species are afraid of us. They're afraid because everywhere we go, we start talking to smaller species about things like individual rights and democratic government. We've been quietly supporting independence movements and encouraging species to stand up for themselves. Lisa shook her head in disbelief. So they're punishing us for trying to help people? They're punishing us for giving other species ideas about freedom, Carl replied. The council has always been controlled by the oldest and most powerful species. They like having smaller species depend on them for protection and resources. Our way of doing things threatens that system. Jake stood and walked to the window that looked out over the station's main hub. Thousands of different beings moved through the corridors below, living and working together in what he had always thought was a symbol of cooperation and peace. Now he wondered how many of those beings were truly free, and how many were just following orders from their more powerful neighbors. So what happens now? He asked without turning around. Now we go home, Carl said. We have 72 hours to evacuate all human personnel and ships from Council space. After that, any human vessel found outside the Sol system will be destroyed without warning. Ryan's jaw was tight with anger. And we're just going to accept this? Carl stood and straightened his diplomatic robes. We don't have a choice. The council has made their decision, and they have the military power to enforce it. The vote was held while I was away on a fake emergency mission to the Rigel system. By the time I got back, it was already over. Jake turned back to his crew and saw his own feelings reflected in their faces: anger, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss. They had spent years building relationships across the galaxy, helping species in need and working to make the universe a better place. Now all of that was being taken away because they had been too successful at spreading dangerous ideas like freedom and equality. There is one piece of good news, Carl added quietly. The Xanthari voted against the protocol. Ambassador Klicknar told me privately that her people refused to accept the council's decision. She said the Xanthari have always admired human ideals and they won't abandon us now. It was small comfort, but Jake was grateful to know that humanity still had at least one friend among the stars. He looked at his crew one more time, then made his decision. Amy, send a message to Earth. Tell them we're coming home and tell them why. Lisa, prepare all our research data for transfer to the Xanthari delegation. Ryan, I want you to download everything you can about Council military capabilities and ship movements. Carl raised an eyebrow. Jake, what are you thinking? Jake Morrison looked out at the stars one more time, then turned to face his friend with determination burning in his eyes. I'm thinking the Council just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They wanted to contain us because they're afraid of what we represent. Well, they're about to find out that some things can't be contained. Ambassador Carl Hayes walked through the massive crystal corridors of Council Station Omega, with his shoulders straight and his head held high. Behind him, 2 council security guards followed at a respectful distance, but Carl knew they weren't there for his protection. They were there to make sure he didn't cause any trouble before his final appearance before the full council assembly. The council chamber was the largest enclosed space Carl had ever seen, a vast crystalline dome that could hold representatives from all 893 member species of the Galactic Council. As Carl entered through the human delegation's entrance, He could see thousands of alien beings filling the curved rows of seats that rose up toward the dome's peak. The air hummed with the sound of hundreds of different languages being translated in real time by the chamber's advanced systems. At the center of the chamber stood the speaker's platform, a raised circle of polished metal where Prime Speaker Vorth Kallen waited. The Saurian leader was nearly 3 meters tall, with dark green scales that gleamed under the chamber's lights, and yellow eyes that had seen over 2 centuries of galactic politics. Behind him, arranged in a semicircle, sat the executive council members representing the 12 most powerful species in the galaxy. Carl had requested this emergency session, knowing it would likely be his last official act as humanity's ambassador. The human containment protocol had been passed, but Carl refused to let it stand without one final attempt to make the council understand what they were doing. Ambassador Hayes. Prime Speaker Vorth Kallen's voice boomed through the chamber's speakers, translated automatically into hundreds of languages. You have requested to address the full assembly regarding Resolution 7749, the Human Containment Protocol. The council will hear your words, though our decision is final. Carl stepped onto the speaker's platform and activated his own translation unit. His voice would now be heard by every being in the chamber, from the massive whale-like cetaceans floating in their water-filled observation pods to the tiny insect swarms of the collective intelligence-honored representatives. Carl began, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. I stand before you today to speak for humanity. But more than that, I stand here to speak for the principles that should guide all civilized beings. A ripple of movement went through the assembled delegates, and Carl could see that his opening had gotten their attention. 50 years ago, humanity took its first steps beyond our home world. We were young, we were inexperienced, and we made mistakes. But we learned from those mistakes and we grew. We learned that the galaxy is vast enough for all of us to flourish. We learned that cooperation achieves more than competition. We learned that every species, no matter how small or how new to the galactic community, has something valuable to contribute. Carl paused and looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as he could. In those 50 years, humanity has participated in 17 peacekeeping missions. We have provided medical aid to 43 worlds struck by plague or natural disaster. We have shared our technology freely with any species that asked for it. We have mediated disputes between races that had been enemies for centuries. And yes, we have made friends. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the usual background chatter of translation systems seemed muted. The official reason given for the human containment protocol is that our expansion is too rapid and our diplomatic methods too aggressive. Let me address these charges directly. Our expansion has been methodical and careful. Every human colony was established only after extensive environmental studies to ensure we would not harm existing ecosystems. Every settlement was placed in systems that were either uninhabited or where local species explicitly invited our presence. Prime Speaker Vorth Kallen shifted impatiently on his platform, but Carl continued. As for our diplomatic methods being too aggressive, I ask you to examine the record. Name one instance where humanity has used military force to solve a diplomatic problem. Name one time when we have threatened another species to get our way. Name one occasion where we have taken something that belonged to someone else. Carl waited, but the chamber remained silent. You cannot name such instances because they do not exist. The truth is that humanity's crime is not aggression. Our crime is giving hope to species that have been told they are too small, too weak, or too primitive to govern themselves. Now there was movement in the chamber. Carl could see delegates from smaller species nodding in agreement. While representatives from the major powers looked uncomfortable, I have spent 10 years in these halls, Carl continued, his voice growing stronger. I have watched the hegemony species dictate terms to dozens of smaller worlds. I have seen the silicon constructs demand tribute from organic races in exchange for basic protection. I have witnessed the ethereal collective treat entire species like children who cannot be trusted to make their own decisions. Prime Speaker Vorth Kallen's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Ambassador Hayes, you will restrict your comments to matters directly related to humanity's situation. Carl smiled grimly. But that is exactly what I am talking about, Prime Speaker. Humanity's situation is directly related to the way this council operates. We are being punished because we believe that all species should have the right to determine their own fate. We are being contained because we have the dangerous idea that freedom and democracy should not be limited to the oldest and most powerful races. The chamber erupted in noise as delegates began talking among themselves. Some species were clearly outraged by Carl's words, while others seemed to be agreeing with him. Furthermore, Carl said, raising his voice above the commotion, the vote on the human containment protocol was conducted while I was deliberately sent away on a false emergency. The council staged a fake crisis on the Rigel frontier specifically to ensure that humanity's representative could not speak against the resolution. This is not the action of a just government. This is the action of tyrants who fear honest debate. Prime Speaker Vorth Kalan's eyes blazed with anger. You dare to call the council tyrannical? I call it what it is, Carl replied without hesitation. A system where the powerful make decisions about the lives of the weak, without allowing them to speak in their own defense. A government where votes are held in secret to prevent opposition. A so-called democracy where one species can be condemned and imprisoned without trial. The noise in the chamber was growing louder, and Carl could see security forces moving toward the platform. His time was running out. You want to know what makes humanity dangerous? Carl shouted over the growing chaos. It's not our ships or our weapons or our technology. It's our belief that every being in this galaxy has the right to be free. It's our conviction that no species should bow to another simply because they are older or stronger. It's our certainty that cooperation works better than domination. Carl looked directly at Prime Speaker Vorth Kalan as the security forces reached the platform. You have voted to contain humanity because you fear what we represent. But you cannot contain an idea whose time has come. You cannot imprison the dream of freedom. And you cannot stop the spread of hope. The security guards reached Carl and began to escort him from the platform. But he had one final message to deliver. To the species that voted for this protocol because you were told it was necessary for galactic stability, I say this. Look around you. Look at the fear in the eyes of your leaders. Ask yourself why they are so afraid of a species that has never threatened anyone. Ask yourself what they are really trying to protect. As Carl was led away from the chamber, he could hear the chaos continuing behind him. Delegates were shouting at each other in dozens of languages, and he caught fragments of arguments breaking out between different species. The vote might have been final, but the debate was far from over. 2 hours later, Carl stood in the docking bay watching the last human transport prepare for departure. Captain Morrison had already left with the Horizon, carrying Carl's coded message to Earth. Now it was Carl's turn to leave, and he knew he would never see Council Station Omega again. As his transport pulled away from the station, Carl looked back at the massive structure that had been the center of galactic civilization for over 3,000 years. He had spent 10 years of his life working within that system, believing that patient diplomacy could solve any problem. Now he knew better. The Council had made their choice, and now humanity would make theirs. Carl had delivered humanity's final message to the galaxy's leaders, and that message was clear. Some things are worth standing up for, even when the odds are impossible. As his ship entered hyperspace for the journey back to Earth, Carl allowed himself a small smile. The Council thought they had solved the human problem, but they had no idea what they had just unleashed. They had tried to contain humanity's body, but humanity's spirit was already spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. The real fight was just beginning. President Maria Rodriguez stood at the head of the emergency cabinet meeting in the secure conference room, deep beneath the United Earth Government headquarters. The massive holographic display showed the positions of every human ship and colony throughout the galaxy, and the sight made her heart heavy. Red warning markers indicated the locations that would soon be abandoned, while blue lines traced the paths home that her people would be forced to take. The message from Ambassador Hayes arrived 6 hours ago, said Dr. Susan Miller, Director of Interstellar Relations. Susan was a thin woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had been dealing with alien politics for most of her career. All human personnel and ships have been ordered to return to the Sol system within 72 hours. After that deadline, any human vessel found outside our solar system will be destroyed. General Pete Walker slammed his fist on the conference table. Pete was a career military officer who had commanded Earth's space forces for over a decade, and his face was red with anger. This is insane. We've got over 200 colonies out there, plus mining stations, research facilities, and trade posts. How are we supposed to evacuate everyone in 3 days? We can't, replied Admiral Kate Phillips quietly. Kate commanded humanity's exploration fleet, and she had been calculating numbers in her head since the meeting began. We have maybe 60 ships capable of carrying significant numbers of people, and some of our colonies are weeks away even at maximum hyperspace speed. President Rodriguez looked around the table at her advisors and military commanders. These were the people she depended on to make the impossible decisions, and right now they all looked as lost as she felt. What are our options? She asked. General Walker stood and activated his own section of the holographic display. Military option first. We've got a fleet of 127 combat vessels, plus another 80 support ships. The Council has over 2,000 ships from various member species, but most of them are old designs with outdated weapon systems. Our ships are newer, faster, and better armed. You're talking about fighting the entire galaxy, Dr. Miller said with horror in her voice. I'm talking about defending our people, General Walker replied firmly. We've been studying Council military capabilities for years during joint exercises. Their fleets are big, but they're not coordinated. Each species uses different technologies and tactics. They've never had to fight as a single force. Admiral Phillips shook her head. Pete, even if we could win a military confrontation, what then? We'd be at war with 800 species. Our colonies would become battlegrounds. Millions of innocent people would die. President Rodriguez held up her hand for silence. What other options do we have, Susan? Dr. Miller activated her own display, showing trade routes and diplomatic connections throughout the galaxy. Complete withdrawal. We pull everyone back to Earth, close all our embassies, end all trade agreements, and cut off all communication with Council species. We become invisible. That's giving up, General Walker protested. No, Dr. Miller said calmly. That's changing the game entirely. The Council thinks they can control us by limiting where we can go, but they're forgetting something important. We don't need their permission to help people. President Rodriguez leaned forward with interest. Explain. The Council operates on the principle that everything has to go through official channels. Want to help a species with medical problems? File a request with the Health Committee. Want to share technology? Get approval from the Technology Council. Want to mediate a dispute? Wait for the Peacekeeping Division to authorize it. Dr. Miller smiled for the first time since the meeting began. But what if we operate outside those channels? What if we help species directly, without asking anyone's permission? Admiral Phillips was beginning to understand. You're talking about going underground. Covert operations. I'm talking about doing what we've always done, but without the bureaucracy, Dr. Miller replied. The Council is afraid because we've been inspiring smaller species to think for themselves. Well, we don't need to be Council members to keep doing that. General Walker looked skeptical. How do we run covert operations when we're supposedly confined to the Sol system? Admiral Phillips stood and walked to the display. We've been mapping hidden hyperspace routes for decades. Most Council species stick to the main trade lanes, but our exploration ships have found dozens of alternate paths through uncharted space. We could position ships in systems the Council doesn't even know exist. President Rodriguez felt a plan beginning to form in her mind. What about our colonies? We can't just abandon 200 worlds full of people. We evacuate the official colonies, Admiral Phillips said. But what if some of our people don't make it to the evacuation ships? What if they get lost in uncharted space and have to establish emergency settlements? You're suggesting we fake the evacuations, General Walker said, and now he was starting to smile. I'm suggesting we give our colonists a choice, Admiral Phillips replied. Anyone who wants to return to Earth can do so safely, but anyone who wants to stay and fight for their home can disappear into the unmapped regions of space. Dr. Miller nodded enthusiastically. The Council will think they've successfully contained us, but we'll actually be more free than we've ever been. No more committees to approve our actions. No more regulations limiting who we can help. No more politics preventing us from doing what's right. President Rodriguez looked around the table and saw the same determination in every face. Are we really talking about becoming space pirates? We're talking about becoming what we've always been, Admiral Phillips said. Explorers, helpers, and friends to anyone who needs us. The only difference is that now we'll be doing it without asking permission. The logistics alone would be massive, General Walker said. But his tone showed he was already planning, rather than objecting. We'd need to establish secret bases, create new supply lines, develop new communication networks. We'd also need to make sure the Council never suspects what we're really doing, Dr. Miller added. Publicly, we have to appear completely defeated and contained. Meanwhile, privately, we build a completely new kind of organization. President Rodriguez made her decision. Susan, I want you to implement the silent protocol immediately. All official human contact with Council species ends as of right now. Pete, begin Operation Phantom Fleet. I want our military assets repositioned to hidden locations throughout uncharted space. Kate, coordinate with our colony administrators. Anyone who wants to come home can do so, but anyone who wants to stay and fight gets full support. She looked around the table one more time. The Council wanted to contain humanity because they're afraid of what we represent. They're about to learn that some things can't be contained. Over the next 72 hours, the galaxy watched as humanity appeared to comply completely with the Council's demands. Human ships departed from Council space in long convoys, carrying refugees and colonists back toward Earth. Human embassies closed their doors and recalled their staffs. Human trade ships canceled their contracts and headed home. But in the hidden spaces between the stars, a different kind of evacuation was taking place. Admiral Phillips's ships were moving through secret hyperspace routes, carrying volunteers and supplies to establish covert bases in systems no Council species had ever explored. Dr. Miller's diplomatic corps was making contact with dissatisfied species throughout the galaxy, offering a new kind of alliance that operated completely outside Council authority. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship as it emerged from hyperspace in an unmapped system near the galactic rim. Behind him, a convoy of 30 vessels carried everything needed to establish humanity's first secret base. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency to begin the most important mission of their lives. Captain, Lieutenant Amy Foster called from her communication station. I'm receiving messages from 17 different species requesting meetings. They all want to know if the rumors are true. What rumors? Jake asked. Amy smiled. That humanity isn't really gone. That we're still out here. Still helping people, but now we're free to do it our own way. Jake looked out at the stars of the unmapped system that would become their new home. The Council thought they had solved the human problem, but they had actually created something much more dangerous than a single species with strange ideas about freedom. They had created a movement. 6 months had passed since the Human Containment Protocol had supposedly trapped humanity in their home solar system, and Council Intelligence Director Zen Thara was beginning to suspect that something was very wrong. The silicon-based being stood in her office aboard Council Station Omega, reviewing reports that made no logical sense. Her crystalline form flickered with different colors as she processed data, a sign of deep concentration among her species. The reports spread across her desk told a story that should have been impossible. Dozens of minor species throughout the galaxy were experiencing sudden technological advances, military improvements, and political changes that seemed to come from nowhere. Director, her assistant Krell 9 announced from the doorway. Krell was a small insectoid from the Hive Collective, chosen for his ability to process vast amounts of information quickly. The latest intelligence reports from the Kepler 7 sector are ready for your review. Zenthara's form shifted to a deep blue, indicating frustration. More impossible coincidences, I assume. The Kepler 7 inhabitants have constructed orbital defense platforms that our analysts say are at least 50 years beyond their previous capabilities, Krell replied, his mandibles clicking nervously. The designs use energy patterns that match no known Council technology, but our computers detect trace signatures that seem familiar somehow. Xanthara activated her holographic display and studied the technical readouts. The defensive systems were elegant and efficient, using principles that reminded her of something she couldn't quite identify. Then it hit her like a lightning bolt. These designs use human engineering principles, she said quietly. The power distribution patterns, the defensive algorithms, even the basic structural approach. This is human technology, but advanced beyond anything they showed us while they were Council members. Krell 9's compound eyes reflected confusion. But Director, that's impossible. All human ships returned to the Sol system months ago. Our monitoring stations confirm that no human vessel has been detected outside their home system since the containment protocol was implemented. Zenthara's form shifted to angry red. Then explain how a primitive species suddenly develops technology that bears clear human signatures. Explain how the Oceanus Federation managed to build underwater cities that rival our greatest architectural achievements. Explain how the Voidwalkers acquired cloaking systems that make their entire fleet invisible to our sensors. She pulled up a galactic map showing the locations of all the recent mysterious technological advances. The pattern was clear once she knew what to look for. Every species that had received unexpected help was located near systems that Council charts listed as uninhabited or unexplored. Director, Krell said hesitantly, there's something else you should know. 3 more species have formally withdrawn from the Council in the past week. They're citing the same reasons as the others. Philosophical differences regarding member species rights and democratic governance, Synthera counted quickly in her head. That brings the total to 15 species that have left the Council since the human containment began. All of them minor species, all of them previously loyal members, and all of them using the exact same language in their withdrawal statements. She turned to face her assistant directly. Krell, I want you to analyze the language patterns in all the withdrawal statements. Look for common phrases, similar sentence structures, anything that might indicate a single source. While Krell worked on his analysis, Synthera continued studying the intelligence reports. The more she read, the more convinced she became that humanity had somehow found a way to operate outside Council space without being detected. But how was that possible when their monitoring systems covered every major hyperspace route in the galaxy? Director, Krell announced excitedly, I found something. All 15 withdrawal statements contain the phrase, the right to determine our own destiny, and 12 of them use the specific term, democratic governance. These phrases appeared in Ambassador Hayes' final speech to the Council, but they're not commonly used by most galactic species. Synthera's form brightened with satisfaction. So we have human influence in the withdrawal statements. What else? I cross-referenced the species that received mysterious technological assistance with those that have withdrawn from the Council. Krell continued. 80% overlap. The species that got help are the same ones that are leaving us. The intelligence director activated her communication system and sent an urgent message to Prime Speaker Vorth Kalan. Within an hour, she was standing in the Prime Speaker's private office, presenting her findings to the Council's most powerful leader. You're telling me that humanity is somehow still operating throughout the galaxy despite being contained in their home system? Vorth Kalan's voice carried dangerous undertones. How is that possible? I believe they established hidden bases and supply lines before the containment deadline, Synthera replied. Our monitoring systems are designed to watch known hyperspace routes, but human exploration ships spent decades mapping alternate paths through uncharted space. Vorth Kalan's yellow eyes glowed with anger. Are you saying that while we thought we were containing them, they were actually preparing to operate completely outside our authority? That's exactly what I'm saying, Synthera confirmed. And it's worse than that. The species they're helping aren't just receiving technology, they're being educated about concepts like individual rights, democratic government, and self-determination. Humanity is building a parallel power structure that operates entirely outside Council control. The Prime Speaker began pacing around his office, his massive claws clicking against the metal floor. How many ships do we estimate they have operating in secret? Unknown, but probably significant. They evacuated over 200 colonies in 3 days, which should have been logistically impossible. I suspect many of those evacuations were staged, with colonists being relocated to hidden bases rather than returned to Earth. Vorth Kalan stopped pacing and turned to face the intelligence director. What do you recommend? We need to send investigation fleets to every system where suspicious activity has been reported, Synthera replied. If we can locate their hidden bases, we can destroy them and end this threat. Do it, Vorth Kalan ordered. Deploy whatever forces are necessary. I want every human base found and eliminated. Over the next several weeks, Council fleets searched dozens of systems looking for evidence of human presence. But every time they arrived at a location where mysterious assistance had been provided, they found only enhanced local capabilities and no trace of outside intervention. Admiral Korvash of the Hegemony Fleet became increasingly frustrated as his ships found nothing but improved defensive positions and suspiciously well-informed local populations. It's like they're ghosts, he reported to Council Command. We know they were here, but we can't find any proof. Meanwhile, in the depths of uncharted space, Admiral Kate Phillips received reports from her network of covert bases. "They're looking for us," she told Captain Morrison during a secure communication session. "Council fleets are investigating every system where we've provided assistance." "Let them look," Jake replied with a grin. "By the time they arrive, we're already 3 systems away helping someone else. Besides, we're not the only ones they need to worry about anymore." He was right. The 15 species that had withdrawn from the Council were beginning to form their own alliance, sharing technology and resources outside Council authority. Dr. Susan Miller had been working with representatives from these species to establish what they were calling the Free Worlds Coalition. The coalition operated on principles that were completely alien to the Council's hierarchical structure. Instead of powerful species dominating weaker ones, all members had equal votes regardless of size or age. Instead of requiring approval from committees and bureaucrats, member species could act immediately to help each other. The Council made a fundamental mistake, Dr. Miller explained to President Rodriguez during a secure transmission. They assumed that containing humanity would end the spread of our ideas. But ideas don't require ships or bases. Ideas spread through communication, through example, and through hope. She smiled as she delivered the most important news. "Maria, we now have over 50 species requesting formal meetings with coalition representatives. Most of them are still Council members, but they're interested in alternatives. The Council's worst nightmare is coming true. Their own members are beginning to question whether the old system still serves their interests." Back on Council Station Omega, Prime Speaker Vorth Callan received increasingly desperate reports from his military commanders. Human influence was spreading faster than they could contain it, and more species were withdrawing from the Council every week, sir, his aide announced nervously. "Ambassador Klicknar of the Zenthari has requested an urgent meeting. She says it concerns the Council's future." Vorth Callan knew what the Zenthari ambassador wanted to discuss. The Zenthari had been humanity's strongest supporters, and now they were probably ready to leave the Council as well. As he prepared for what might be the most important meeting of his political career, Vorth Callan began to realize that the Human Containment Protocol had achieved the exact opposite of its intended purpose. Instead of stopping human 2 years after the Human Containment Protocol had supposedly solved the galaxy's human problem, Prime Speaker Vorth Callan stood alone in his private office looking out at Council Station Omega's nearly empty docking bays. Where once thousands of ships from hundreds of species had filled the massive structure, now only a few dozen vessels remained. The great station that had been the center of galactic civilization for 3,000 years was becoming a ghost town. The door chimed softly, and his aide entered with another resignation message. "Sir, the Aquatic Collective has officially withdrawn from the Council. That brings our total membership down to 612 species." Vorth Callan didn't turn away from the window. "Almost 300 species have left us in 2 years. How many have joined this Free Worlds Coalition? Current intelligence estimates put coalition membership at over 200 species, sir. They've established their capital on an artificial world called Haven, built entirely through cooperative effort between member species." The Prime Speaker finally turned to face his aide. "And our economic situation?" The aide's expression grew even more grim. "Critical, sir. The loss of human trade routes cost us 30% of our cargo capacity. The species that have left the Council were responsible for 40% of our resource production. Our military is stretched thin trying to maintain control over our remaining territory, and we're facing rebellion on 17 member worlds." Vorth Callan walked to his desk and activated the holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red areas marked coalition territory. Blue showed remaining Council space, and gray indicated systems that had declared independence from both organizations. The map looked like a disease had infected the galaxy, with red spreading steadily into what had once been solid blue. "What about our military option? Can we still defeat the coalition through force?" His aide consulted his datapad nervously. "Admiral Korvash reports that coalition forces now outnumber ours 3-1. Their technology has advanced rapidly through cooperative research programs, and their ships are commanded by experienced human officers who understand our tactical limitations. And their morale? High, sir. They believe they're fighting for freedom and democracy. Our forces are increasingly questioning why they're fighting at all." Vorth Callan closed his eyes and tried to remember how everything had gone so wrong. The Human Containment Protocol was supposed to be a simple solution to a minor problem, Now it had destroyed the galactic order that his species had helped build over millennia, sir. His aide continued hesitantly. There's something else. Ambassador Hayes has sent a message requesting a meeting. He says it's time to discuss the future of galactic civilization. The Prime Speaker felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. He had been expecting this moment for months, ever since it became clear that the Council was losing the conflict they had started. Where does he want to meet? Neutral space aboard a coalition vessel. He guarantees your safety but suggests you bring only a small escort. Vorth Kalan laughed bitterly. Guarantees my safety? 2 years ago I commanded the largest fleet in galactic history. Now I need protection from the species I tried to contain. 3 days later, Vorth Kalan's transport approached the UES Freedom, flagship of Admiral Kate Phillips and mobile headquarters of the Coalition Diplomatic Corps. The ship was massive, clearly built using resources and technology from dozens of different species working together. It was also beautiful in a way that Council ships had never been. Designed for exploration and cooperation, rather than intimidation and control as his transport docked with the Coalition vessel, Vorth Kalan tried to prepare himself for what might be the most important negotiation in galactic history. He was accompanied by only 3 advisors, including Intelligence Director Zenthara, whose analysis had first revealed the scope of humanity's secret operations. Ambassador Carl Hayes met them at the airlock, and Vorth Kalan was surprised to see that the human looked older, but not defeated. Behind Hayes stood representatives from dozens of coalition species, including Ambassador Klicknar of the Zenthari, who had been among the first to abandon the Council Prime Speaker. Hayes said formally, "Welcome aboard the Freedom. I appreciate you accepting our invitation to discuss the current situation." They were escorted to a large conference room where the walls displayed views of space, showing dozens of coalition ships holding position nearby. Vorth Kalan noticed that the ships represented technologies from many different species, but they moved with the precision and coordination of a unified fleet. "You wanted to discuss terms," Vorth Kalan said without preamble. "What are your demands for ending this conflict?" Hayes sat down across from him with a slight smile. "I think there's been a misunderstanding, Prime Speaker. We're not here to discuss terms for ending anything. We're here to discuss the future of galactic civilization." "What do you mean?" "I mean that the conflict ended months ago when the last Council species realized they had a choice between the old system of domination and the new system of cooperation." Hayes replied calmly. "The Coalition won because we offered something better than what the Council provided." Vorth Kalan felt his anger rising. "You destroyed 3,000 years of galactic stability. You turned species against each other and caused chaos throughout the galaxy." "We gave species a choice," Ambassador Klicknar interjected, her translator converting her clicks and whistles into standard galactic. "The Council never allowed choices. The Council demanded obedience and punished independence." Hayes nodded in agreement. "Prime Speaker, when you implemented the human containment protocol, you taught us something valuable. You showed us that we didn't need your permission to help people. You demonstrated that the Council was more interested in maintaining power than in serving the species it claimed to protect. So what happens now?" Zenthara asked, her crystalline form flickering with various colors. "Do you plan to destroy what remains of the Council?" "Destroy it?" Hayes looked genuinely surprised. "Why would we want to do that? The galaxy is vast enough for multiple approaches to civilization. If some species prefer the Council's hierarchical system, they're welcome to it." Vorth Kalan stared at the human ambassador in confusion. "You're not demanding our surrender?" "We're not demanding anything," Hayes replied. "The Coalition exists for species that want democratic governance and cooperative relationships. The Council can continue to exist for species that prefer the old ways. There's no reason we can't coexist peacefully." The Prime Speaker felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. "But your forces outnumber ours. Your technology is superior. You could destroy us completely." Hayes leaned back in his chair with the expression that Vorth Kalan couldn't interpret. "Prime Speaker, do you remember what I told the Council 2 years ago? I said that humanity's crime was giving hope to species that had been told they were too small or too weak to govern themselves." He gestured toward the Coalition representatives around the table. "Look at what happened when those species were given the chance to prove themselves. The Kepler-7 people developed biotechnology that's revolutionizing medicine throughout Coalition space. The Voidwalkers created navigation systems that opened up entirely new regions of the galaxy for exploration. The Oceanus Federation designed underwater habitats that allow land-based species to colonize ocean worlds. Every species had something valuable to contribute once they were free to try, Ambassador Klicknar added. The Council's mistake was assuming that age and size determined worth. Hayes stood and walked to the viewport showing the Coalition fleet outside. We learned something important during these past 2 years. Cooperation achieves more than competition. Democracy works better than autocracy, and freedom is more powerful than control. He turned back to face Vorth Callan directly. The reason we're not demanding your surrender is simple. We don't need to defeat you to prove our point. The results speak for themselves. Vorth Callan looked around the room at representatives from species he had once considered minor and unimportant. Now they sat as equals with humans and Zinthari, their voices carrying the same weight in coalition councils. It was everything the old council system had been designed to prevent. "What do you want from this meeting?" he asked quietly. "We want you to understand that this isn't about winning or losing," Hayes replied. "It's about building something better. The coalition will continue to grow because we offer something the council never could, the chance for every species to reach its full potential." Hayes returned to his seat and looked directly into Vorth Callan's eyes. "Prime Speaker, humanity was contained for exactly 72 hours. After that, we were free in ways we had never been before. Free to help whoever needed help. Free to explore wherever we wanted to go. Free to build the kind of civilization we believed in." He smiled with what Vorth Callan finally recognized as genuine satisfaction. "The Council went too far when they tried to contain us. But in doing so, they gave us the greatest gift possible. They forced us to become what we were always meant to be." As Vorth Callan's transport departed the Coalition fleet several hours later, he looked back at the UES Freedom and the ships surrounding it. Representatives from over 200 species were working together as equals, building a civilization based on cooperation rather